So we talked a little bit already about why Lord of the Rings for Lent, and then we ended on the question, and I think it's an important one. Is this a Christian story? Is it a Christian or Catholic story? Is it even a religious story? And what do you think?
I think that we cannot get away from the idea that it is a religious story. And this goes back to, I can't remember his name, Father Tom, one of my professors at seminary, who actually made this argument. He was a Dominican priest who had talked about art and symbolism and a whole bunch of other stuff with us. And he made the argument that speculative fiction is the only place where actual religion is being investigated. You can go to the Barnes & Noble and you can find the religion section, and it's all devotional, is what he argued.
Yes.
But if you want to actually investigate, what does religion do? How does religion work? What do we do in the world as religious people? You got to go to the science fiction section. You got to go to the fantasy section. And I think he's right. And I think that there is a point in that where this speculative fiction is a thing we encounter in the Bible as well. We call them parables.
Yeah.
The core question of science fiction, of fantasy, of that sort of stuff is, what if the world was a different place? Yeah. What if humans built a warp drive and went out into space and built this Starfleet Academy thing? Right. That's the world you want to live in, right? And to build the world that we want to live in, we have to ask, what if that world existed? So when Jesus tells a parable, he says, what if there was a man who was going from Jerusalem to Jericho who got set upon by robbers? Mm-hmm. And after he was beaten, stripped, and left for dead, other people walked by on the other side, which is normal. That's the world we live in.
Right.
But the enemy of his people comes and sees him and has pity on him. Takes him, puts him on his own animal, takes him to the inn, cleans his wounds, and pays for his rehabilitation. So, is that the world you want to live in?
Yeah, so much like people, so he's out telling these stories, and much like you have people who might be trekkers, who are going to look at them and say, I want to cosplay Star Trek, right? So Jesus is hoping people will, cosplay the parables.
Cosplay the Good Samaritan. Say, this is a person who I cannot stand, and I'm going to show him care and love in a neighborhood, because that's the world that I want to live in. The world where forgiveness and kindness matters.
So Jesus is sort of, and I think we talked about this a lot, both Pentecost and in Advent.
Yes.
That's what discipleship. Here's this community. Let's live this world so that people look at us and want to be in it.
And so you ask, is Lord of the Rings a Christian or even a religious book? It can be. If we look at this world and say, that fellowship, that's where I want to live.
Yeah, but I guess a part of me is like, I think that's a little bit of a cop-out, because then I'm trying to figure out what book wouldn't be.
Sure.
So is Star Trek a religious story? For me, it's more of a yes and no, but maybe that's as much of a cop-out as yours, in part because, Tolkien was sort of adamant, this is really just a story to enjoy.
Yes.
But, here's that, but, he used the word application, right? The themes and experiences of his life are then applied to this fictional world. And that's the way every author works, right?
Absolutely.
No author is writing tabula rasa, right? Every author is working from their experiences. They see something, they hear something, whatever. They have to. So in that sense, Tolkien is no different. So we can talk about Tolkien's experiences and how they become important in this novel. But I honestly, I think that the most important experience that Tolkien has is his experience in World War I. And how could it not have been? One thing that when I was doing some of the research for this that I hadn't realized before, I knew he'd fought in the war, but he was at the Battle of the Somme. And for people who don't know, it was one of the early battles of the war, basically, it was a bloodbath. The first day, there were 20,000 casualties on just the British side, and the British took very heavy losses. They had 50,000 casualties on the British side, 20,000 killed in one single day. The Battle of the Somme lasted 3 months. It went on for 3 months, and in that time, 350,000 men died. Most men, I'm assuming. There might have been some women there anyway.
Men and boys.
Human beings. Men and boys. Maybe some women. Who knows? A million casualties. And by casualties are people that are killed, missing, or go home maimed. And casualties count because you're trying to get them out of the battle. And they're out of the battle whether they're dead or missing.
And when they're in bad shape, they're even a greater drain on home supplies.
Right.
And so that's even a thing that's encouraged, is harming people while leaving them alive.
I think when we were talking about this yesterday, I said I made the mistake of listening to Motorhead's 1916, which was written. Lemmy wrote it after watching a documentary on the Battle of the Somme, I will put a link to that below as well. And the version that I'm going to link to also has images of the battle. But as you look at those barren landscapes, I mean, this is one of those themes that's prominent for Tolkien, yes. Right? These landscapes. This is the Ents, right? This is Mordor gearing up. This is the war machine in which everything that we do is focused on one thing: creating weapons to kill other human beings, yeah. Right? And that is our focus. That is our focus. And the industrialization that happened in Europe, and then the following war destroyed the European landscape. You can always tell when Tolkien says something is an evil place because there's no trees. There's no trees, yeah. Right? And some of that is Tolkien coming from this fairly agrarian experience, the Shire. Sure. We could probably touch on that again later. And then he goes to this war in which there's no trees, and it's not that there's no trees. They've been removed. They've been removed, or they've been bombed. Yes. Right? They've been bombed to oblivion. There are some important themes and images that crop up from Tolkien's experience. We talked about the war machine, the dead marshes. Which, the corpse-filled marsh, that's the Battle of the Somme. But also, and I think that for people who have experienced war, and I have not, but I know I've talked to men and women who have, and including members of my own family, that, it's that comradeship, right? That's the thing that gets you through. Yeah, your buddy, the buddy that you know is going to do it. And all the war literature and art that comes out of the First World War, All Quiet on the Western Front is one of those great examples of it, right? Yeah. Where you have, the buddy that gets you through it, that picks you up on his back and carries you out, right? So you have the comradeship, and I think Sam and Frodo are definitely, the experience of that, the idea of the shell shock, and I will say that Peter Jackson, who did the movie, I mean, he was a fanboy, yeah. Right? And he really captures a lot of that experience, and the stills from the movie, a lot of the scenery from the movie looks like the Battle of the Somme. Oh, yes. And if you look at Frodo's face, you see shell shock. Yes. And, I mean, it's worth noting, shell shock was a new thing. It was. Right? The idea of PTSD, which sort of comes later, but shell shock, the trauma of the war, this was because this was a different war. And I think that the different kind of war, yeah. Right? And I think the part that creates this vacuum in European society is that, there was a utopianism in Europe at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. Right. There's this idea, we have this amazing technology, penicillin? We did that already. Penicillin was World War II. Okay, never mind. But we have other stuff that we've done. But the technology, the machines, the ability to control nature. Yeah, the Haber process is around World War I. Yes, and the Haber process, it creates elemental nitrogen, essentially, which gets used to make, even today, huge proportions of fertilizer. We can grow food because of the Haber process. You put electricity in one end, you get fertilizer out the other end. It's great. But the other thing you can do with fixed nitrogen is you can make explosives. And this is the thing that I think you sort of read in Tolkien's novel again and again, is this mental process in Europe, because what happened is we human beings are capable of these amazing things, yeah. Right? Cars, automobiles, and all this stuff, and all of a sudden the man on the battlefield, in this experience of total war, what they experienced was we created all of these amazing machines, and what we're doing with them is we are murdering each other, slaughtering each other on a mass scale. For no other purpose but to gather that extra inch of land. And you see this in the art between the wars, this very profound attempt to try to bring some meaning back into their lives, because nothing meant anything anymore. So Dadaism, right? Yes. Dadaism, nothing. The world means nothing. But Dadaism is actually very hopeful, just a little aside. Absolutely. The Dada, that they would create poems by cutting up a newspaper and shaking it in a bag and then taking and I would read my students these poems. Oh, yeah. And then they would tell me what it meant. And what it meant is we made that meaning out of nothing because there was nothing. Yes. And we can forge that meaning ourselves. Well, cutting up the newspaper and putting it in the bag, that's what happens in World War I. Mm-hmm. And I can pull it out of the bag, and you want to know something? You can take those fragments of European society and you can create something from that. And this is, anyway, that's a little bit of a artistic aside. I promise you won't be tested later. So Tolkien was very much like other soldiers of the period who are trying to use his art to make sense of what happened, consciously and unconsciously. And I think this is and I think this is where it becomes a religious novel, because he is using his Catholic faith, this story which feels like a true story, which is a true story to him, that he's using this framework and the symbols and the narrative structure of his Catholic faith to try to make sense of this horrific experience and to entertain his children, right? A little bit of both.
Well,
So
The Hobbit is to entertain the children.
Yeah.
The Lord of the Rings is to do his own emotional, mental processing on what exactly happened to him.
Okay. And that's what I would argue.
Yeah. And the Hobbit, we know, is actually for his children, because apparently his own son tells the story of how he was telling them a bedtime story, and his 5-year-old son says, last time you said the door was blue, and now you said it was green, and Tolkien wandered off and grabbed a pen and started writing.
Oh, because he went...
So the Hobbit is definitely for children.
Okay.
And then to process everything that happened, the Lord of the Rings comes out of it because he says, okay, I have this thing, this ring. Where did its power come from? Well, it comes from that technology. It's manufactured. It's brought into the world to then control it. And so what do we do with that? And so he responds, as this machine is, to say, well, could we destroy it? And the answer we'll find out is not fully.
Or not easily.
Not easily and not fully. And the things of it remain even afterwards.
Right. And which is and that's a Catholic theme, right? So I'm thinking about, that's one, the world is not fully redeemed.
Yes.
Right? That is definitely an aspect of this novel. The importance of virtues. The virtues come in all the time. The patience, humility, charity, mercy. These are all really important. Continued, not just in this novel, but in The Hobbit. Mercy towards Gollum, and that God works through Gollum, right? Or, I'm not going to say God, because that's not really fair to what happens in the story. But that in Catholic belief, God works through people like Gollum for God's own purposes. And so you can sort of, wow, all this mercy towards Gollum kind of works out in the end. So
it does.
It does.
From the very beginning.
Yes.
Gandalf says, he still has a part to play in this, and I don't know what it is.
Yes.
And that's a faith statement that even though Gollum is twisted and at the moment at least evil, he still has some part to play.
And I think that brings up another one. Along with sort of all the other stuff, there is this sense, and I think a lot of people sense it, and I think it's not quite correct, that this is a novel about good and evil. And it's a novel about evil.
Yes.
But I think there's a sense in which when we're talking about good and evil, we often think in dualistic terms.
Yeah.
Right? So there is Sauron, which we repeatedly say in the novel, he's evil. Sauron is evil. We know he's evil. He's the Dark Lord. He is evil personified. But there's no counterpart to Sauron in the novel.
Not in the novel.
Not in the novel. There are in other areas, and we've debated about whether or not to bring this up.
I think if we wander into Silmarillion, we're going to be really.
We're going to be here forever.
We're not going to do that.
We're going to
take this book as this book.
Say this book. So at least in this novel, right, coming to terms with the evil that is Sauron, with the world that Sauron wants to create and has created, the destruction, the militarization, the Uruk-hai marching, the
might makes right.
The UberMensch marching across Middle Earth, right?
Yeah, that's what they are.
Yeah, they are. They are the manufactured human beings that are the perfect war machines, and they're coming through, and they don't have things like a conscience to bother us, right? So you have this evil figure who's doing evil things. There's like, wait, where is the counterpart? Right, and the counterpart is the fellowship.
It's not one; it is.
It is the group, and I think you put it so well during one of our conversations. Right, it's not us versus them. It's not good versus evil. It's me versus we.
Yes.
Right, and me. And Sauron is the will turned in on itself, and we'll probably talk about that again later. But Sauron is all about me, power.
I want, I
desire, I will, and the people and all of the bad things that happen in the story happen from people that do me instead of we.
Over and over again.
And I think that this is this brings us back to I think one of the most important themes of the novel and the theme that we have chosen to focus on. Which is the importance of fellowship. And I think that is a reflection of his Catholic faith, but also a reflection of his experience in World War I.
Absolutely.
When the way you got through 3 months of war, of constant battle, the way you got through it was your buddies. Your buddy, your best buddy, and then the company who was going to protect you and who you would live for and who you would die for.
Even if you're not the one who sleeps next to this guy, you still know that he has your back and you have his.
And you have his. And so this idea of fellowship is the idea that we want to focus on for Lent And that is the idea that we will turn to in the next segment.